I thought if they attacked, I would hear gunfire first. But that night, the first thing I heard was my name. I had been at Ridgeway Base for exactly 12 days. 12 days in Vietnam, and I had already forgotten what a good night's sleep felt like. The days were suffocatingly hot, and the nights were so dark that you couldn't tell what you were staring at or what might be staring back. That night, I was on my second guard shift from 11 p.m. to Mila until nearly 1 a.m. I sat behind sandbags, my M16 resting across my knees, my steel helmet tilted slightly from sweat. The silence was so deep, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then the voice came. Not Vietnamese, not a shout. English. An American voice. Private Daniel Cooper. I froze. No one in the squad turned to look at me, but I knew they were frozen too. My throat went dry, my hands tightening around my rifle without me realizing it. That was impossible. There was no way they could know. You're 19 years old. You enlisted last year. Your father works at a repair shop in Ohio. I couldn't remember when I last took a breath. They couldn't know that. They couldn't. I had never fired a single shot at the enemy. I had never seen their faces. Yet in that darkness, it felt like they were standing right behind me, reading straight out of my head. The voice didn't stop with me. It called out other names. One by one, like roll call back in the barracks, except there was no officer standing in front of us. There was only the jungle. Between each name, there was a pause long enough for me to hear the insects. Long enough to think, if they know our names, what else do they know? There was no gunfire, no mortar rounds, no order to return fire, just waiting. I wanted them to shoot. It sounds insane, but I did, because at least if the shooting started, I would know what to do. I had been trained for that. This I hadn't. I didn't know whether to look up or keep my head down. I didn't know whether to block my ears or listen. Every word they spoke felt like a wire tightening around my chest, slow and steady. When the voice finally faded, no one said a word, but I knew something had changed. The next morning, the officers said it was psychological warfare. They said we were safe. No casualties, no contact. But I didn't feel safe, because for the first time since I arrived in Vietnam, I understood something clearly. The enemy didn't need to see me to know who I was. And if they wanted to, they could call my name. Any night. The second night was worse, not because the voice came back louder or closer, but because we were waiting for it. Everyone said they slept that day, but you could tell nobody really did. The faces looked heavier, eyes sunken, jokes died halfway through sentences. Even the veterans stopped pretending it was nothing. I was back on perimeter duty again, different sector, same darkness. Midnight passed. Then 12:30. I kept telling myself that if nothing happened by 1, it wouldn't happen at all. That was when the loudspeaker crackled. A short burst of static. Calm, controlled, almost gentle. Daniel Cooper, you didn't write back to your mother last week. My stomach dropped. I hadn't. I'd meant to. I kept telling myself I'd do it tomorrow. Somehow the jungle knew before I did that there wouldn't be a tomorrow that felt normal again. Around me, heads turned. Slowly this time. No one said anything, but I could feel their eyes on me. Not accusing, uneasy, like my name being spoken made the base smaller, tighter, more exposed. The voice kept going. She worries when you don't write. I wanted to scream at them to shut up. I wanted to fire into the tree line just to make it stop. But my fingers stayed outside the trigger guard, exactly like they'd trained me. That discipline felt useless now. They started mixing the names. A corporal from Texas, a radio operator from California, a medic who had been here nearly a year. Different ranks, different units, no pattern we could see. And that was the point. Between names, the voice talked about home, about girlfriends, about unfinished plans, about things you only thought about when you were trying to fall asleep. They weren't threatening us, they weren't insulting us, they were reminding us. Someone further down the line started breathing too fast. I could hear it even over the insects. A sergeant moved quietly, crouching low, putting a hand on the kid's shoulder. No yelling, no orders, just pressure grounding him. That scared me more than panic would have. It meant this had happened before. After 20 minutes, the loudspeaker stopped. Just like that. No attack followed. No probes, no sappers, nothing for the artillery to hit, nothing for the flares to catch. We stood there until dawn anyway. At first light, they sent out patrols, found nothing but jungle and empty ground where sound had traveled farther than we thought possible. At the briefing, an officer said the same thing as before: psychological operations, harassment, meant to disrupt sleep, lower morale, provoke mistakes. He said we were holding, but when I cleaned my rifle that morning, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear of dying, from the feeling that someone out there knew me better than I knew myself and was taking their time. And that night, as the sun went down, none of us asked whether the voice would return. We only wondered whose name it would choose next. By the third night, the loudspeaker didn't need to speak to hurt us. The damage was already done. Men jumped at shadows. Every cough sounded like movement. Every rustle in the tree line felt deliberate. The perimeter was quiet, but inside the wire, the base felt tighter than ever, like we were all breathing the same thin pocket of air. I hadn't slept more than an hour since the first night. Not real sleep, just drifting, then snapping awake, heart racing, convinced I'd heard my name again. When my shift came up, I felt hollow, like there was nothing left in me except muscle memory. That scared me. The voice returned at 12:17 a.m. We knew the exact time because someone checked their watch the moment it started. Static, a pause, then no names, just a question. Do you know why you're really here? No one moved. No one answered, of course, but I felt the question land anyway. It slid past the sandbags, past the rifles, straight into places training never touched. They didn't wait for an answer. You think it's duty, you think it's honor, but back home, they've already moved on. I felt my jaw tighten. Anger flared, hot, sharp. That was new. Fear I could handle. This was different. They don't hear this jungle every night, the voice continued. They don't hear your friends breathing when they think no one's listening. I realized then what they were doing. They weren't trying to scare us into running. They were trying to make us feel alone. A flare went up without orders, bright white, cutting the darkness. For a moment, the jungle froze in hard contrast. Trees, shadows, nothing else. The voice kept talking. Look at the light, it said calmly. It shows you everything, except who's speaking. The flare burned out. Darkness rushed back in, thicker than before. Someone cursed under their breath. Another guy laughed, too loud, too fast. Nobody joined him. When it finally ended, the silence felt heavier than the sound ever had. No one relaxed. No one joked. We stayed at readiness long after the radio confirmed nothing was moving. The officers adjusted schedules the next day, shorter shifts, more coffee, more patrols. They called it mitigation. It didn't help, because the voice hadn't just entered the base, it had settled in. It lived in the pauses between words, in the seconds before sleep, in the way men stared a little too long at letters from home. I caught myself listening for it even when it wasn't there. And that's when I understood the worst part. They didn't need the loudspeaker every night. They'd already taught us how to hear it on our own. The fourth night, they changed tactics. There was no warning, no static, no slow buildup. The voice came on suddenly, mid-sentence, mid-thought, like it had been listening the whole time and decided to interrupt. Daniel Cooper, you're counting the days wrong. My spine went cold. I hadn't realized I was counting out loud in my head. You think you've been here 2 weeks, the voice said. It feels longer because every night stretches. I pressed my back harder into the sandbags, scanning the tree line, knowing it was useless. The sound didn't come from one direction anymore. It felt like it was everywhere, above us, behind us, inside the wire. You wonder how many nights it will take before you stop remembering home clearly. That one hit harder than anything before, because it was already happening. This time, they didn't just talk to individuals. They talked to the base. They mentioned how many men were on perimeter, how often patrols rotated, how flares went up faster on the eastern side than the western. Details. Not precise enough to call targets, but close enough to make us imagine what would happen if they ever decided to stop talking. A lieutenant whispered into the radio requesting permission to fire illumination rounds. The reply came back negative. No confirmed targets. Don't waste ammo. Don't give them what they want. That made sense. It didn't make us feel any better. The voice softened. You're tired, it said. Tired men make mistakes. Someone slammed a fist into the sandbags. Another guy muttered a prayer. I realized my teeth were clenched so hard my jaw hurt. Then the voice did something new. It stopped using names. Instead, it described us. Some of you stare into the jungle because you hope something moves. Some of you keep your eyes on the ground because you're afraid it will. That was when I understood they were watching us. Not with eyes, but with patience. Near 1 a.m., the loudspeaker cut out mid-sentence. No sign-off, no fade, just silence. We waited for the follow-up. Mortars, sappers, anything. Nothing came. And somehow, that was worse. At dawn, a private broke down while cleaning his weapon. Just sat there shaking, whispering that he couldn't tell which thoughts were his anymore. The medic took him away quietly. No report, no announcement. That absence said everything. The officers finally admitted what we already knew. This wasn't about killing us. It was about wearing us down until we stopped trusting the night, each other, even our own heads. That evening, as the sun sank and the jungle swallowed the light, no one spoke. We just waited. Because by then, we all knew the voice wasn't asking questions anymore. It was measuring how close we were to breaking. The fifth night, the loudspeaker never came on, and that terrified us more than anything it had ever said. We stood to at dusk, like always, checking weapons, tightening straps, pretending routine still meant control. The jungle looked the same as every other night, thick, dark, endless, but our minds filled it with sound that wasn't there. Every man was listening, waiting. Midnight passed. Then 12:30. Someone checked a watch. Someone else cleared his throat too loudly. No one laughed. I realized my body was reacting as if the voice were already speaking. Heart racing, muscles tight, breath shallow. The enemy didn't need batteries or wires anymore. They had taught us the pattern, and now we completed it ourselves. Around 1 a.m., a flare went up on the far side of the perimeter. Accidental. A nervous hand. The light washed over the trees, empty as ever. No voice followed. That was when it hit me. The loudspeaker was never the weapon. We were. At first light, words spread quietly. We were being rotated out within the week. Higher command had decided the base wasn't worth the psychological cost. Officially, it was a tactical adjustment. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. They hadn't taken the base, they hadn't fired a shot, but they had forced us to leave. As we packed, I found myself straining to remember the sound of the voice, tone, rhythm, anything solid. It was already slipping away like a dream that leaves only the fear behind. On the last night, lying on my poncho liner, I realized something I didn't want to admit. If the loudspeaker came on one more time, I didn't know if I wanted it to stop, because at least then the fear would have a shape. Years later, people would ask me what combat was really like in Vietnam. They expected stories about firefights, explosions, close calls. I never told them about the loudspeaker. Because how do you explain that the moment that broke you wasn't when someone tried to kill you, but when someone knew your name, said it calmly, in the dark, and proved they didn't need to pull the trigger to win?